Preface. How often conspiracy theories are overlooked without a further investigation into the subject to see if it is true or has some truth involved. Although my specialty is theology, I wanted to write a book on conspiracy theories which were mocked at till they was proven to be true. And there are many which involves the United States, and I imagine many more to come, especially when it involves the COVID vaccine, which I will not tackle in this book, but show that with the United States past events, one cannot truly fully trust our political leaders or even many of our doctors. They all need accountability, otherwise history will constantly repeat itself, as we see it has with the current vaccine. Host of the Mr. Kakalides and the Bible Podcast.
Chapter 01. There are many examples of conspiracy theories that was proven to be true. The following is a list of 33 such examples. 1. MKUltra. The CIA's mind control program, known as MKUltra, was a real covert operation that aimed to explore mind control techniques and behavior modification from the 1950s to the 1970s. 2. Tuskegee Syphilis Study. The Tuskegee Syphilis Study, conducted from 1932 to 1972, involved the unethical study of syphilis in African American men without their informed consent, thus perpetuating racial discrimination in medical research. 3. Operation Northwoods. Declassified documents revealed that in the early 1960s, the U.S. Department of Defense proposed Operation Northwoods, a plan to stage false flag terrorist attacks in the United States as a pretext to justify military intervention against Cuba. 4. COINTELPRO. The FBI's counterintelligence program, COINTELPRO, was exposed in the 1970s for its clandestine operations to infiltrate, disrupt, and discredit various political organizations, including those involved in civil rights and anti-war movements. 5. Operation Paperclip. After World War II, the U.S. recruited German scientists, including former Nazis, through Operation Paperclip, with the aim of gaining their scientific knowledge and preventing them from falling into Soviet hands. 6. Iran-Contra Affair. In the 1980s, it was revealed that high-ranking U.S. officials had facilitated the covert sale of weapons to Iran, using the proceeds to fund Contra rebels in Nicaragua, despite a congressional ban. 7. The Manhattan Project. During World War II, the U.S. secretly developed atomic weapons as part of the Manhattan Project. The existence of the project and the successful creation of the atomic bomb were kept hidden until the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. 8. NSA Surveillance. The revelations by Edward Snowden in 2013 confirmed that the National Security Agency, NSA, was engaging in widespread surveillance of American citizens, collecting and analyzing their electronic communications without their knowledge or consent. 9. Watergate Scandal. The Watergate scandal in the 1970s involved the illegal activities carried out by the Nixon administration, including the break-in at the Democratic National Committee headquarters. The subsequent investigations led to President Nixon's resignation. 10. Operation Gladio. Operation Gladio was a covert NATO project that involved the establishment of secret, stay-behind armies in several European countries during the Cold War. These armies were intended to counter any potential Soviet invasion, but were also involved in various clandestine activities. 11. Gulf of Tonkin Incident. The Gulf of Tonkin Incident in 1964, which was used to justify increased U.S. military involvement in the Vietnam War, involved false reports of North Vietnamese attacks on American ships. Declassified documents later revealed that the second attack did not occur. 12. Operation Fast and Furious. This ATF, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives operation, conducted from 2006 to 2011, aimed to track firearms purchased in the U.S. and smuggled into Mexico. However, some of the weapons were lost, and they later appeared at crime scenes, leading to controversy and conspiracy theories. 13. Operation Mockingbird. Operation Mockingbird was an alleged CIA program in the 1950s to influence and control media organizations and journalists. While the full extent of the operation remains unclear, Declassified documents suggest that the CIA sought to shape media narratives. 14. Operation Chaos. Operation Chaos was a covert CIA program in the 1960s and 1970s that monitored and infiltrated various anti-war and civil rights groups in the United States. The program aimed to gather intelligence and disrupt these organizations. 15. The Business Plot. The Business Plot, also known as the Wall Street Putsch, was an alleged conspiracy in the 1930s involving wealthy businessmen who planned to overthrow President Franklin D. Roosevelt and establish a fascist regime in the United States. While the plot was never carried out, a congressional committee confirmed its existence. 16. Operation Snow White. Operation Snow White was a covert operation carried out by the Church of Scientology in the 1970s. Scientologists infiltrated various government agencies to purge unfavorable records regarding the church and its founder, L. Ron Hubbard. The operation was exposed, leading to legal action. 17. Operation Ajax. Operation Ajax was a covert CIA operation in 1953 that orchestrated the overthrow of Iranian Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh. The operation was conducted to protect Western interests and control Iran's oil industry. 18. The Manhattan Project radiation experiments. During the development of the atomic bomb, researchers conducted human radiation experiments as part of the Manhattan Project. These experiments involved exposing individuals to radiation without their informed consent, often resulting in harmful health effects. 19. Operation Midnight Climax. Operation Midnight Climax was a CIA program in the 1950s and 1960s that used brothels in San Francisco and New York as fronts for experiments involving LSD and other mind-altering substances. The aim was to study the effects of these drugs on unsuspecting individuals. 20. Operation Ajax in Guatemala. Similar to the operation in Iran, Operation Ajax in Guatemala involved the CIA orchestrating the overthrow of President Jacobo Arbenz in 1954. The operation sought to protect the interests of the United Fruit Company and prevent the perceived spread of communism. 21. Operation Gladio B. Operation Gladio B, a continuation of the original Gladio program, was a covert NATO operation alleged to involve the manipulation of terrorist attacks in Europe during the Cold War. The program aimed to influence public opinion and maintain Western influence. 22. Operation Popeye. Operation Popeye was a covert weather modification program conducted by the U.S. military during the Vietnam War. The program aimed to extend the monsoon season and impede enemy supply routes, but it was kept secret until its exposure. 23. Operation Condor. Operation Condor was a covert intelligence sharing program among South American dictators in the 1970s. The program involved political repression, torture, and assassination aimed at suppressing opposition and left-wing movements in the region. 24. Operation Ajax in Chile. In 1973, the CIA supported the overthrow of Chilean President Salvador Allende in a coup known as Operation Ajax in Chile. The coup led to the establishment of a military dictatorship under General Augusto Pinochet. 25. Operation Chatter. Operation Chatter was a CIA program in the 1950s that involved research into the use of hallucinogenic drugs for interrogation and mind control purposes. The program aimed to develop substances capable of breaking down enemy resistance. 26. Operation 40. Operation 40 was a CIA covert operation in the 1960s involving the recruitment of Cuban exiles to carry out covert activities against Fidel Castro's government, including assassination attempts. 27. Operation Glowing Symphony. Operation Glowing Symphony was a classified U.S. military operation in the 1960s that involved the deployment of nuclear-armed bombers to the Arctic during the Cold War as a show of force against the Soviet Union. 28. Operation Ajax in Indonesia. Operation Ajax in Indonesia, also known as the CIA's Jakarta Method, involved the overthrow of President Sukarno in 1965. The operation supported the subsequent military regime, which carried out mass killings and purges. 29. Operation Cyclone. Operation Cyclone was a covert CIA program during the 1980s that provided financial and military support to Afghan Mujahideen fighters in their resistance against the Soviet Union's invasion of Afghanistan. 30. Operation LAC and Operation DEW. Operation LAC, large area coverage, and Operation DEW were classified U.S. military tests in the 1950s that involved the release of zinc-cadmium sulfide, a radioactive substance, over populated areas without the knowledge or consent of the public. 31. Operation Chatter in Okinawa. Operation Chatter was also conducted in Okinawa, Japan, during the 1950s. The program involved the testing of chemical agents, including LSD, on unknowing American and Japanese personnel to study the effects of these substances. 32. Project SHAD. Project SHAD, Shipboard Hazard and Defense, was a series of classified U.S. military tests conducted during the 1960s and 1970s. The tests involved exposing military personnel to various chemical and biological agents to evaluate their effectiveness in combat situations. 33. Operation TPAJAX. Operation TPAJAX, similar to Operation Ajax, was a covert CIA operation in 1953 that orchestrated the overthrow of Iranian Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh. The operation aimed to safeguard Western interests and control Iran's oil industry.
Chapter 02. I am not going through all the 33 of them to show who said the conspiracy theory, which was proven to be a fact, but will show a few of them. MK-Ultra was a covert CIA program that aimed to explore various methods of mind control and behavioral modification. The program operated from the 1950s to the early 1970s. Due to its secretive nature, MK-Ultra became the subject of numerous conspiracy theories before its existence was officially acknowledged. Some of the conspiracy theories surrounding MK-Ultra included: 1. Mind control experiments. One prevalent conspiracy theory was that MK-Ultra conducted extensive mind control experiments on unsuspecting individuals, including using drugs, hypnosis, and psychological manipulation to control their thoughts and actions. 2. Assassination attempts. Another theory suggested that MK-Ultra was involved in planning and carrying out assassinations of political figures and influential individuals by manipulating their minds or inducing behaviors. 3. Psychological warfare. There were claims that MK-Ultra was involved in developing psychological warfare techniques, including influencing public opinion, manipulating media, and destabilizing foreign governments. 4. LSD experiments. MK-Ultra's involvement in testing the effects of LSD on human subjects was a major focus of conspiracy theories. It was believed that the CIA used LSD as a tool for mind control and interrogation. Notable figures who brought attention to these conspiracy theories include: 1. John Marks. Investigative journalist John Marks, in his book The Search for the Manchurian Candidate, extensively researched and exposed the MK-Ultra program, shedding light on its activities and raising concerns about ethical violations. 2. Gordon Thomas. Journalist and author Gordon Thomas wrote Journey into Madness, the true story of secret CIA mind control and medical abuse, which delved into the MK-Ultra program and its controversial experiments. 3. Senate hearings. In 1975, the U.S. Senate conducted hearings known as the Church Committee to investigate various CIA activities, including MK-Ultra. The hearings revealed the existence of the program and validated many of the previously dismissed conspiracy theories. Following the Church Committee hearings, the CIA officially acknowledged the existence of MK-Ultra in 1975 and released documents outlining the program's activities. These revelations confirmed that many of the previously dismissed conspiracy theories were, in fact, true. B. The Tuskegee Syphilis Study was a controversial clinical study conducted by the U.S. Public Health Service, PHS, from 1932 to 1972. The study was designed to investigate the natural progression of untreated syphilis in African American men. The participants were falsely informed that they were receiving free medical care for bad blood, when in reality they were not being treated for syphilis, even after the discovery of penicillin as a successful treatment for the disease. The study became the subject of intense scrutiny and criticism once its details were revealed to the public. Several conspiracy theories surrounding the Tuskegee Syphilis Study emerged, although it is important to note that these theories were ultimately proven to be true. 1. Deliberate infection theory. Some believe that the subjects were deliberately infected with syphilis as part of a government-sponsored program to study the effects of the disease. While this theory was not entirely accurate, the study did involve withholding treatment from infected individuals, which allowed the disease to progress and cause significant harm. 2. Racial motivation theory. Another theory suggested that racism played a role in the study, suggesting that African American men were targeted specifically to observe the effects of syphilis on their bodies. This theory was partially true, as the study primarily focused on African American participants, contributing to racial disparities in healthcare and unethical treatment practices. 3. Government cover-up theory. There were suspicions that the U.S. government, particularly the PHS, deliberately concealed the true nature of the study to avoid public backlash. This theory was proven to be true when the study's details were made public, revealing the extent of the deception and unethical practices involved. C. Operation Northwoods was a proposed plan developed by the U.S. Department of Defense in the early 1960s. The plan involved staging false flag terrorist attacks on American soil to create a pretext for military intervention in Cuba. Although the plan was never implemented, it has become the subject of conspiracy theories. However, it is important to note that Operation Northwoods was not proven to be true. Rather, its existence was revealed through declassified documents. Conspiracy theories surrounding Operation Northwoods generally revolve around the idea that the U.S. government was willing to orchestrate acts of terrorism against its own citizens as a pretext for war. These theories suggest that the government could have been involved in or allowed events like the September 11th attacks or other significant incidents to occur for political or military purposes. It is crucial to emphasize that there is no credible evidence supporting these conspiracy theories. The U.S. government has consistently denied involvement in orchestrating or allowing acts of terrorism against its own citizens. The declassified documents regarding Operation Northwoods serve as evidence of a proposed plan, but not as proof of actual implementation. The existence of Operation Northwoods was made public in 1997 when the documents were declassified and released by the John F. Kennedy Assassination Records Review Board. The documents were discovered by James Bamford, an investigative journalist and author, who included them in his book, Body of Secrets. The revelation of these documents sparked public interest and discussions about the potential extent of government deception and manipulation. D. COINTELPRO, short for Counterintelligence Program, was a series of covert and often illegal activities conducted by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, in the United States from the 1950s to the 1970s. The program's primary objective was to surveil, infiltrate, disrupt, and discredit various political organizations and individuals deemed subversive by the FBI. While COINTELPRO was initially kept secret, it was eventually exposed, and subsequent investigations confirmed its existence. Prior to its exposure, there were no specific conspiracy theories circulating about COINTELPRO, as the program was entirely unknown to the public. However, there were suspicions and concerns about government surveillance and interference with civil rights and political activism during that time. The exposure of COINTELPRO began in 1971, when a group of activists broke into an FBI field office in Media, Pennsylvania, and stole documents. These documents, known as the media burglaries or the Citizens Commission to Investigate the FBI, were leaked to the press and revealed the existence of COINTELPRO. The documents outlined the FBI's covert operations and illegal activities targeting various civil rights groups, anti-war activists, and social justice organizations. The exposure of COINTELPRO led to further investigations, including Senate hearings known as the Church Committee in 1975. The committee's findings confirmed the existence of COINTELPRO and revealed its extensive reach and illegal activities. The Church Committee's investigations resulted in significant reforms in intelligence gathering and the establishment of new guidelines to protect civil liberties. Some notable individuals and organizations who exposed or spoke out about COINTELPRO include 1. The Citizens Commission to Investigate the FBI, the group of activists who broke into the FBI field office in Media, Pennsylvania, and obtained the COINTELPRO documents. 2. Journalist Betty Metzger. She received and published the stolen COINTELPRO documents in the Washington Post, bringing the program to public attention. 3. Activist organizations and individuals targeted by COINTELPRO, various civil rights groups, anti-war activists, and social justice organizations affected by COINTELPRO actively spoke out about the FBI's surveillance and disruption tactics. It is worth noting that the exposure and confirmation of COINTELPRO's existence revealed significant abuses of power by the FBI, leading to increased public awareness and scrutiny of government surveillance and intelligence activities. Operation Paperclip was a real covert operation conducted by the United States government following World War II. It aimed to recruit German scientists, engineers, and technicians, including former Nazi Party members and SS officers, and bring them to the United States. These individuals would then contribute their expertise to various fields, including aerospace, rocketry, and intelligence gathering, to gain an advantage over the Soviet Union during the early stages of the Cold War. However, it's important to note that while Operation Paperclip itself was a historical fact, there are certain conspiracy theories and allegations that circulated around it. Some of these theories included 1. Nazi infiltration of the United States. This theory suggested that the influx of German scientists, facilitated by Operation Paperclip, allowed former Nazis to infiltrate the American government and military-industrial complex. It claimed that these individuals continued their Nazi activities covertly and pushed their agenda within the United States. 2. Knowledge of war crimes. Another theory suggested that the United States knowingly recruited scientists who had been involved in war crimes and human experimentation during World War II. It alleged that the U.S. government turned a blind eye to these activities in exchange for the scientific knowledge and expertise these individuals possessed. 3. Influence on secret technology programs. Some conspiracy theories propose that the German scientists brought to the United States through Operation Paperclip had a significant impact on secret technology programs, such as advanced aerospace and UFO research. These theories often speculated that the scientists' knowledge and expertise in unconventional technology played a crucial role in these programs. The Iran-Contra affair was a political scandal that occurred in the mid-1980s during the Reagan administration. It involved the unauthorized sale of weapons to Iran, which was under an arms embargo, and the diversion of funds from those sales to support anti-Sandinista rebels, known as the Contras in Nicaragua. While the affair itself was a proven fact, there were several conspiracy theories and allegations surrounding it. Here are some of the theories that emerged. 1. Shadow government involvement. Some conspiracy theories alleged that the Iran-Contra affair was not just the result of a few rogue officials, but was orchestrated by a shadow government or a deep state within the U.S. government. These theories claimed that influential figures behind the scenes were manipulating events to pursue their own agenda, bypassing official channels and disregarding the law. 2. Knowledge at the highest levels. Another theory suggested that high-ranking officials within the Reagan administration, including President Ronald Reagan himself, were fully aware of and involved in the Iran-Contra operations. It alleged that the public narrative of Reagan's lack of knowledge or involvement was a cover-up, and that the president was actively participating in the decision-making process. 3. Drug trafficking allegations. Conspiracy theories also emerged linking the Iran-Contra affair to drug trafficking. Some claimed that the Contras, who were supported by the U.S. government, were involved in smuggling drugs, particularly cocaine, into the United States to fund their activities. The conspiracy theory suggested that the Reagan administration turned a blind eye to these activities as long as they served their larger geopolitical goals.
Chapter 03. Now let's talk about vaccines that was used by the United States as experiments on people, without them knowing it. There have been instances in the past where medical experiments were conducted on individuals without their informed consent with vaccines. Here are 10 such examples. 1. One notable example is the Tuskegee syphilis study, which took place in the United States from 1932 to 1972. In this study, the U.S. Public Health Service withheld treatment for syphilis from a group of African American men in order to observe the natural progression of the disease. The participants were led to believe that they were receiving free medical care, but the study actually harmed their health and well-being. 2. Another example is the case of Guatemala syphilis experiments conducted by the United States Public Health Service between 1946 and 1948. In this study, Guatemalan prisoners, soldiers, and mental health patients were intentionally infected with syphilis and other sexually transmitted diseases without their consent or knowledge. The aim was to test the effectiveness of penicillin as a treatment for these diseases. 3. The Willowbrook State School experiments, 1956 to 1971. This study involved mentally disabled children at the Willowbrook State School in New York. Researchers intentionally exposed the children to hepatitis to study the disease's progression. The conditions at the institution were also deplorable, with overcrowding and poor sanitation. 4. The Holmesburg Prison experiments, 1951 to 1974. Conducted at Holmesburg Prison in Philadelphia, this study involved testing various substances, including pharmaceuticals and cosmetics, on inmates. The prisoners were not adequately informed about the potential risks and were not given the opportunity to provide informed consent. 5. The Fernald School radiation experiments, 1946 to 1953. This study involved mentally disabled children at the Fernald School in Massachusetts. Researchers fed the children radioactive substances to study how their bodies absorbed and excreted the radiation. The participants and their parents were not informed about the nature of the experiments. 6. The MK Ultra Project, 1950s-1973. This was a series of mind control experiments conducted by the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA. The project involved administering drugs, including LSD, to individuals without their knowledge or consent, with the aim of developing mind control techniques. 7. The San Antonio Contraceptive Study, 1971 to 1973. This study, sponsored by the U.S. Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, involved administering an experimental contraceptive to low-income women in San Antonio, Texas, without fully informing them of the potential risks and side effects. Many participants experienced adverse reactions, and some pregnancies occurred despite the contraception. 8. The Jewish Chronic Disease Hospital Study, 1963. This study involved injecting live cancer cells into elderly, chronically ill patients at a Jewish chronic disease hospital in Brooklyn, New York, without their informed consent. The researchers aimed to observe the patient's immune response to the cancer cells. The study was shut down when the media exposed its unethical nature. 9. The Guatemalan STD experiments, 1946 to 1948. In addition to the previously mentioned Guatemala syphilis experiments, researchers from the United States intentionally infected Guatemalan prisoners, soldiers, and sex workers with syphilis, gonorrhea, and chancroid to study the effectiveness of penicillin. The participants were not informed or given consent, and the experiments led to significant harm and suffering. 10. The Atomic Energy Commission's Human Radiation Experiments, 1944 to 1974. The United States Atomic Energy Commission sponsored several experiments involving the deliberate exposure of human subjects to ionizing radiation. These experiments included exposing patients to high levels of radiation during cancer treatment without their informed consent or disclosing the potential risks. These examples illustrate further instances where individuals were subjected to medical experiments without their consent, leading to physical and psychological harm. These cases highlight a dark chapter in the history of medical research, where vulnerable populations were subjected to harmful experiments without their consent. These cases represent unethical and harmful medical practices that violated the rights and well-being of the individuals involved, and there is no doubt in my mind that the COVID vaccine is the worst in U.S. history. Chapter 04. Now let's look at some of the doctors who was involved in these vaccines of the past. A. The Tuskegee syphilis study, conducted from 1932 to 1972, was a notorious unethical medical study carried out by the U.S. Public Health Service. Several doctors and researchers were involved in the study. Here are some of the key individuals associated with the Tuskegee syphilis study. 1. Dr. Taliaferro Clark. Clark was the original physician involved in the study. He initiated the project and was responsible for recruiting participants and coordinating their medical care. 2. Dr. Eugene Dibble. Dibble was a black physician who became involved in the study later on. He was responsible for recruiting participants and managing their medical care. 3. Dr. Oliver C. Wenger. Wenger was a physician and researcher who joined the study in 1933. He served as the Public Health Service's Chief Venereal Disease Control Officer in the southeastern region of the United States, and was responsible for overseeing the study's operations. 4. Dr. Raymond Vonderlehr. Vonderlehr joined the study in 1932 and later became the study's director. He played a significant role in shaping and overseeing the study's progression. These doctors, along with other medical professionals and researchers, were involved in the implementation and continuation of the Tuskegee syphilis study. The study involved withholding treatment from African American men diagnosed with syphilis even after effective treatment became available, without their informed consent. B. The Guatemala syphilis experiments, also known as the Guatemala syphilis study, were conducted by the United States Public Health Service, USPHS, between 1946 and 1948. The experiments aimed to investigate the transmission and treatment of syphilis. The primary individuals involved in the study were 1. Dr. John C. Cutler. Dr. Cutler was a prominent researcher and physician who served as the lead investigator for the Guatemala syphilis experiments. He was affiliated with the USPHS and played a key role in planning and executing the study. 2. Dr. Juan Funes. Dr. Funes was a Guatemalan physician who collaborated with Dr. Cutler during the experiments. He assisted in identifying and recruiting subjects for the study. 3. Dr. John F. Mahoney. Dr. Mahoney was another USPHS physician involved in the Guatemala syphilis experiments. He played a significant role in the administration of the study and the collection of data. It's important to note that these experiments were highly unethical and violated human rights. Subjects were intentionally infected with syphilis without their informed consent and were subjected to inadequate treatment or none at all. The experiments were not publicly disclosed until 2010, and they drew significant criticism and condemnation. C. The Willowbrook State School experiments, which took place from 1956 to 1971, were conducted at the Willowbrook State School, a facility for children with intellectual disabilities located in Staten Island, New York. The experiments aimed to study the transmission and effects of hepatitis. The primary individuals involved in the Willowbrook State School experiments were 1. Dr. Saul Krugman. Dr. Krugman was a pediatrician and researcher who led the experiments at Willowbrook. He was affiliated with the New York University School of Medicine and the New York City Department of Health. Dr. Krugman played a significant role in both designing the study and overseeing its implementation. 2. Dr. Robert W. McCollum. Dr. McCollum, a virologist, worked alongside Dr. Krugman in conducting the experiments. He played a crucial role in the laboratory analysis of blood samples and the identification of hepatitis strains. It is worth noting that the Willowbrook State School experiments were controversial and highly criticized. The study involved deliberately infecting children with hepatitis in unsanitary conditions and without obtaining informed consent from their parents. D. The Holmesburg Prison experiments were conducted at Holmesburg Prison in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, between 1951 and 1974. These experiments involved testing various pharmaceuticals and cosmetic products on incarcerated individuals. The experiments were led by several doctors and researchers, including 1. Dr. Albert M. Kligman. Dr. Kligman was a dermatologist and the primary figure behind the Holmesburg prison experiments. He was affiliated with the University of Pennsylvania and served as the principal investigator for the study. Dr. Kligman conducted numerous experiments involving the testing of substances on the skin of prisoners. 2. Dr. Eugene B. Goldfarb. Dr. Goldfarb was a physician and researcher who worked closely with Dr. Kligman at the University of Pennsylvania. He played a significant role in designing and conducting the experiments at Holmesburg Prison. 3. Dr. William B. Seaman. Dr. Seaman was a physician and researcher who collaborated with Dr. Kligman and Dr. Goldfarb in the Holmesburg Prison experiments. He was involved in the administration of the study and the collection of data. These experiments were highly controversial due to the ethical concerns surrounding the use of vulnerable populations and the lack of informed consent. E. The Fernald School radiation experiments, conducted between 1946 and 1953, were a series of unethical experiments conducted on mentally disabled children at the Fernald School in Massachusetts, USA. The experiments aimed to study the effects of radiation exposure on the human body. There were several doctors and researchers involved in these experiments. While I don't have access to specific names of individuals involved, it is known that some of the researchers and doctors associated with the Fernald School radiation experiments included 1. Dr. Donald L. Troutman. Dr. Troutman was the director of the Fernald School during the time of the experiments. He approved and oversaw the experiments conducted on the students. 2. Dr. Robert Stone. Dr. Stone was a physician and researcher involved in the radiation experiments. He was responsible for administering the radioactive substances to the subjects and monitoring their effects. 3. Dr. Carl Heller. Dr. Heller was a radiation specialist and researcher who worked at the Fernald School during the experiments. He participated in the planning and execution of the radiation experiments. 4. Dr. William Sweet. Dr. Sweet was a physician and radiologist who was involved in the Fernald School experiments. He provided medical supervision and expertise during the experiments. These are some of the known individuals associated with the Fernald School radiation experiments. F. The MKUltra project, also known as the CIA's Mind Control Program, was a covert research program conducted by the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, in the United States from the 1950s to the early 1970s. It aimed to develop techniques for manipulating and controlling human behavior through various means, including the use of drugs, hypnosis, and other psychological methods. While the full extent of the project and its participants remains classified, here are a few notable individuals associated with MKUltra. 1. Sidney Gottlieb. Dr. Sidney Gottlieb was a chemist and the chief chemist of the CIA's technical services staff. He was heavily involved in overseeing MKUltra and its subprojects. Gottlieb was responsible for coordinating various aspects of the program, including the administration of LSD and other mind-altering substances to unwitting subjects. 2. George H. White. George White was a CIA officer who served as a high-ranking official within the MKUltra program. He was involved in experiments related to drug-induced mind control and interrogation techniques. 3. Ewan Cameron. Dr. Ewan Cameron, a psychiatrist from Canada, was a subcontractor for the MKUltra program. He conducted experiments at the Allen Memorial Institute in Montreal, which involved subjects being subjected to extreme forms of sensory deprivation, electroconvulsive therapy, ECT, and drug-induced comas. 4. Frank Olson. Frank Olson was a civilian biochemist and bacteriologist who worked for the U.S. Army's Biological Warfare Laboratories. He was associated with MKUltra through his involvement in experiments with LSD. Olson's mysterious death in 1953, allegedly linked to his exposure to LSD, led to public scrutiny and controversy surrounding the program. It's worth noting that MKUltra was a vast and secretive program, with many individuals involved at various levels of participation. The full scope of its participants and activities may not be known due to the destruction of many documents related to the project. G. The San Antonio Contraceptive Study, conducted from 1971 to 1973, was a research project that aimed to evaluate the effectiveness of various contraceptive methods among low-income women in San Antonio, Texas. The study was led by a team of researchers and medical professionals. While I may not have access to specific names of all individuals involved, here are some notable figures associated with the San Antonio Contraceptive Study. 1. Dr. Leon Sparoff. Dr. Leon Sparoff was a prominent gynecologist and reproductive health researcher who played a key role in the San Antonio Contraceptive Study. He was one of the principal investigators and contributed to the design and implementation of the study. 2. Dr. Victor Y. Fujimoto. Dr. Victor Fujimoto, a reproductive endocrinologist, was another key member of the research team. He was involved in the study's design and oversaw the clinical aspects, including the recruitment and follow-up of participants. 3. Dr. Richard Berkman. Dr. Richard Berkman, a gynecologist and researcher, was also involved in the San Antonio Contraceptive Study. He contributed to the study's design and data analysis. 4. Dr. Alfred Z. Abahamed. Dr. Alfred Abahamed, an obstetrician gynecologist, was part of the research team for the San Antonio Contraceptive Study. His expertise likely contributed to the study's reproductive health aspects. These are some of the individuals associated with the San Antonio Contraceptive Study. However, it's important to note that the study involved a larger team of researchers, clinicians, and support staff who contributed to its execution and findings. H. The Jewish Chronic Disease Hospital Study, also known as the Willowbrook Study, was conducted in 1963. It was carried out by Dr. Chester M. Southam, a cancer researcher, and several other individuals. However, it is important to note that this study was highly controversial and raised significant ethical concerns. Here are some of the individuals involved in the study. 1. Dr. Chester M. Southam. He was the lead researcher and main proponent of the study. He conducted various experiments involving injecting live cancer cells into patients without their informed consent. 2. Dr. Emil P. Freireich. Although not directly involved in the Jewish Chronic Disease Hospital Study, Dr. Freireich was a prominent cancer researcher at the time and supported Dr. Southam's research approach. 3. The patients. The study involved terminally ill cancer patients who were admitted to the Jewish Chronic Disease Hospital in Brooklyn, New York. Some patients were injected with live cancer cells, while others received placebos or no treatment at all. 4. Hospital staff. The study required the cooperation of the hospital staff, including nurses, doctors, and administrators, who were responsible for the care and treatment of the patients involved. The Atomic Energy Commission (AEC) conducted various human radiation experiments between 1944 and 1974. These experiments involved exposing individuals to radiation to study its effects. Several individuals and organizations were involved in these experiments. Here are some key figures. 1. Atomic Energy Commission (AEC). The AEC was responsible for overseeing and conducting the human radiation experiments. It was a U.S. federal government agency established in 1946 to promote the peaceful use of atomic energy and oversee nuclear weapons development. 2. Department of Defense, DoD. The Department of Defense, particularly the U.S. military, was involved in some of the radiation experiments. They sponsored and conducted studies to assess the effects of radiation on military personnel. 3. Various research institutions and universities. Numerous research institutions and universities were contracted or collaborated with the AEC and DoD to carry out the human radiation experiments. These include the University of California, the University of Chicago, Vanderbilt University, and others. 4. Individual researchers and scientists. Many individual researchers and scientists were involved in planning, conducting, and overseeing the human radiation experiments. These individuals included medical doctors, physicists, biologists, and other experts. Some notable researchers involved in these experiments were Dr. Karl Heller, Dr. Eugene Sanger, and Dr. William Sweet. 5. Subjects and participants. The experiments involved a wide range of subjects, including military personnel, hospital patients, prisoners, and mentally disabled individuals. Some experiments were conducted on uninformed or unknowing subjects who were not adequately informed of the risks involved. It is important to note that the human radiation experiments conducted during this period raised significant ethical concerns and violated the principles of informed consent and human rights.